Good afternoon. Welcome to this session, this side event, this panel session on developing infrastructure to ensure access to clean and affordable energy. I'd like to give you all a moment to put on your headsets, regulate the volume. It might be very loud, it might not be loud at all, just to calibrate for us all to slowly but surely arrive. This is state-of-the-art technology, so very COP panel instruments. So welcome to the EIB in Benelux Pavilion. Great to be having this session here today. My name is Anna Rovzar. I'm an energy specialist, and if you've just joined us, welcome. Welcome to our panelists as well, who we'll be hearing from in just a moment. We're here to discuss the role of energy, the energy transition, industrial decarbonization, but more particularly how infrastructure, value chains all fit within that picture. Because energy is a vast world, as we all know, and we're here to zoom in, take a bit of a deep dive on the industrial and the infrastructural side. Now, we'll be doing that through two distinct panels, and I'll invite the first panelist to join me on stage in just a moment. And we'll have some closing remarks as well by Belgium's Federal Minister for Energy, Tine van der Straten. So maybe to set the scene first, by way of giving us some food for thought and getting our panelists, let's say, started. So we're here at COP29, no better place to be speaking about energy and climate. The link between energy and climate is quite clear. We know that to limit the effects of climate change, we need to reduce temperature increase. Temperature increase comes from greenhouse gas emissions, or a surplus of that. We know that 75% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the way we produce and consume energy. So we need to be transforming the way we go about that. This is a vast system. It is a very big ship, if I can use a terminology we'll be using in just quite a bit, that needs to turn. And so it's a challenge that goes planned, that goes discussed, that goes thought through very carefully. It's not just about power. I've worked a lot in the renewable energy field, and I know that there's a lot of, let's say, linkages to the power sector with technologies that exist that are going forward quite rapidly. But it's also about industry and how we change the way industry and its infrastructure and those value chains work and power themselves or energize themselves. That has repercussions for how we want to take those that infrastructure, those value chains forward. So it's about electrons and it's about molecules, something that is front and center for us all. And again, it's important that we speak about this at COP29 because today is Energy Day. Today, I think as we speak, there are two pledges. There's three pledges really, but two pledges are being discussed right now by the parties. One on a global storage and grids infrastructure pledge. The other on green hydrogen, in fact. So if last year we collectively, all countries, signed up to triple renewables capacity by 2030, tomorrow, or today, hopefully, we'll have news on what's happening, what's being pledged on in grids and storage. I think there's a six-fold increase in storage capacity by 2030 is on the table, and building out 25 million kilometers of grids by 2030 as well, up to 80 million, 80, by 2040, so a big challenge there. So a lot is on the table, and I think that will have repercussions for everything we do here when we are at COP and when we leave COP as well going forward. So in that light, I'd like to invite the panelists of panel number 1 to join me on stage. You know who you are, but I will introduce you. So please do join me here for this first panel on the ports of the future and the infrastructure needs. Philippe Julien, who is the founder and chairman of Kenneth J. Green, please do join us here. Pavan Shikuri, who is the vice president of CCUS at Holcim. Dan Schalk, the CEO of North Sea Port. And Tom Houtekiet, the CCO of Port of Antwerp-Bruges and president of the Belgian Hydrogen Council. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Please do take a seat and get comfortable. Just as a way of an opening statement, maybe, we'd love to hear from you in terms of this big helicopter view that I just put out there. How each of your companies, how each of your organizations come in, look at the decarbonization challenge, and dare I say also contribute to it, enable it. And I'd like to maybe start with you, Tom, if I may, from the port of Antwerp and Bruges. We'll have to turn on the microphone, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yes, it works better. Yeah, okay. I'm Tom Houtekiet. I'm working for the port of Antwerp-Bruges, which is a major port in the world, the second one in Europe. Ports have been always extremely important. They have brought wealth in history to us. They saved us also recently in the corona crisis. We have seen the importance of a port and what it can do to supply chains. But I do think also that today everybody is aware that the role of a port is crucial as a critical enabler to make the energy transition happening. And why is that? That's because a port is in fact an ecosystem where it brings a crossroad where three businesses are coming together. The maritime business is coming there. We have, of course, a big industry area in port areas, and we have logistics, which are coming, inland logistics, which are coming and starting also from that port. They are interconnected to each other. They strengthen each other. And if we come to the point of energy transition and decarbonization, the three elements of them, they have their own specific challenges to decarbonize. So it means that the port is involved in all of them to make it happen, not only from a port of an infrastructure perspective, but also as an enabler, as proof of concept pilot projects. So ports will always be there and will be playing a future role in the transition.
Thank you very much, Tom. I mean, you highlight to the role of the maritime industry as well, and logistics, of course. So that really illustrates much further what is happening within that part of the port of Antwerp and Bruges. May I turn to you?
Yeah, I think in general what Tom said is also what we can say on North Sea Port. We are a port where it's not only about logistics and infrastructure, but also a lot of industries even in the port. And I think that's typical also for some other Northwest European ports, like we have colleagues in Rotterdam and others, that we are really combining that. And so infrastructure is still a very important thing. It's another form of infrastructure, but in the classical role. I think what is new for the port, if we compare with 10, 15 years ago, that is the role to connect, and not only connecting in the real sense, but also connecting private companies to have the added value in the climate change, to bring them together. For example, if you want to work more circular, it's combining several companies and looking to new raw materials or second raw material also, which can be combined, which is a new thing. Secondly, what is new for the ports, that normally a hinterland is to bring the goods which are important in the port towards the sea. If we look, for example, to the reduction of CO2 and the climate change, it's also about the inlocked industries who have also the need to have the CO2 handled, exported, reused, and that there is a sort of shift in the way goods are coming to a port. There are more coming from a hinterland. If you're looking, for example, to the CO2, you have to bring them to the ports where the knot has always been there, but is still there. But we have also to discover a bit what's our hinterland in another way, an industrial hinterland, not only looking to their normal goods, but also looking to their needs of electricity, to their needs of CO2 reduction. And then again, we play that role in connecting. And maybe a third role, which is especially new for us, that is for the first time in our history that we're also investing in infrastructure outside our port area. If we're looking to, for example, CO2 reduction, it's the first time together with the colleagues of Antwerp Bruges that we will invest in the network of pipelines all over the country, really investing to have that CO2 brought to the port, and that's a new role we are also playing now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. You highlight the role of being a platform that really brings together and enables other companies to, let's say, decarbonize themselves in that way. So at aggregate, it is a platform function. Philippe, if I could ask from your perspective, coming in on where you stand in the decarbonization storyline.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm with a company called Kenneth J. Green.
I'm afraid I have to ask you to turn on the microphone. Can it be heard? My apologies. It works? Sorry. Then it's me who doesn't hear it.
No problem. So I'm with a company called Kenneth J. Green, based out of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. We came into existence to help make green energy, green decarbonization projects actually happen. Too often in the Caribbean and around the world, you hear about, on one side, the investors say, well, we're looking for bankable projects. On the other side, the recipients say, well, we need the projects. So we are a Caribbean-grown green engineering project development entity dedicated towards realizing a pipeline of decarbonizing projects in the Caribbean and beyond. And that's the role that we bring, and how we bring it is by being able to look throughout the entire energy value chain, upstream, midstream, downstream, break out of the silos, ensure that the commercial viability, the techno-economic reality of a large-scale decarbonization project actually happens. And we have the privilege of having been grown out of Trinidad and Tobago, which, for those of you who don't know, has had a rich history the past 50, 60 years. We've been very successful in monetizing the natural gas resources over the years, to the point where we have, we're one of the top 5 exporters of ammonia and methanol. And then interestingly, why Kenneth J. Green really was driven into existence is it's one of the few places in the world that has a hydrogen hub of 24 ammonia and methanol plants, world scale, that's in demand for hydrogen because we have been encountering a natural gas decline. So why that is so relevant to this conversation about power and infrastructure is that there's a real opportunity in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean at large, which I'll get to if time permits, to really become a green ammonia, green methanol producer with a competitive advantage of already having an established infrastructure of ammonia and methanol plants that could convert that green hydrogen into an exportable commodity. And it links back to all of this because Trinidad and Tobago, again, one of our largest importers of our ammonia and methanol is Europe. So this becomes very real, very fast with the implementation of the CBAM regulation that has caused our country to recognize we have to do something different in order to stay relevant and competitive to the global chemical arena.
Thank you, Philippe. You mentioned the role of the hydrogen hub, how that is something that needs to be built out. I think there's a lot of attention going towards how that can, let's say, be replicated around the world for exportable commodities. There's a lot of discussions going on about precisely this. And I'd love to maybe circle back on that in a subsequent round of questions to see how we should best shape that forward, I think, as a community of energy practitioners. But thank you for highlighting this. And maybe turning to Pavan, if I can come in from your side. Decarbonization for Holcim. How do you contribute?
Thank you once again. In my personal role, I'm the group head of CCUS and e-fuels. So before getting into what I actually do, let me just come back and position why decarbonizing building is an essential, absolute must for world to become net zero. The building sector corresponds to approximately 37% of the global emissions. 1/3 of it comes from raw materials, and the remaining 2/3 of it comes from the existing buildings in use. Holcim, as a global leader in a building material company, we play across the entire envelope. So we start with decarbonizing our own operations by phasing out of fossil fuels, using of renewable electricity, decarbonizing using CCUS. That's where ports and infrastructure becomes absolutely critical. But at the same time, building with less. How can we build new buildings with less amount of concrete, less amount of cement in concrete, less amount of clinker in cement, and less amount of CO2 that goes into the clinker? And the third part is, how do we decarbonize existing buildings in use so that it can be more energy efficient? So we do have solutions on roofing and insulation so that the existing fleet of the buildings can be more decarbonized. And lastly, building new with old. What we meant to say is cement and concrete can be infinitely times recyclable. What that means is that while we demolish building materials, how can we reuse those materials so that we don't have to use the virgin materials? I'm pleased to inform that we are building a 220 residency property in Paris with completely recycled clinker, cement, and concrete. We are doing exactly the same in UK as well. But in order for that to happen, there needs to be infrastructure that enables and encourages construction material to be moved around and to be repurposed. Coming back to my role, I'm the group head of CCUS. In that role, I look after developing CCUS projects and developing a strategy in investments. We do have 17 CCUS flagship projects, and most of the projects, technology is a good news story. We can install the capex and we can capture the CO2. But the most important bottleneck becomes is, how do I move that CO2 where it needs to go? And at this moment, if I am sitting in Belgium, I have we recently broken ground on a new cement kiln in Belgium, thanks to the support of the EU and then the support that we received from the Belgian government. It would be CO2 capture ready by 2027 or 2028 if my numbers serves me well. However, we will not be able to capture the CO2 because the CO2 has to be transported from Mons to Port of Antwerp, hopefully through a pipeline. It has to be liquefied in Port of Antwerp, put it in a ship, sent it to Norway, and stored in Norway. And even though an emitter like ourselves is open to investing, but unless the infrastructure exists, it will be extremely difficult for us to decarbonize. And the second infrastructure is also about the raw material infrastructure. There are two raw materials I'm talking about, which is fuels, as well as the raw materials from abroad, where ports become an extremely important one. Let me come to the raw materials, right? CBAM creates an absolute good opportunity for us to decarbonize cost efficiently outside of Europe, in Algeria, Morocco, and Egypt, because onshore CO2 storage is possible there. And there's an opportunity to centralize and then export into Europe. But my biggest problem is the congestion in the port in both sides of the continents. And that is limiting how much I can decarbonize, at what pace I decarbonize. And the second infrastructure that's absolutely required is the fuel infrastructure. Just a technical lesson. In order to produce cement, you start with limestone, heat it up to 1400 degrees. In order to heat up to 1400, traditionally they have used natural gas or coke. But in Europe these days, what we do is we don't use fossil fuel anymore. We use municipal solid waste. We use wastewater sludge, which is for all practical purposes human poop, recycle, and all the waste that can go in. But in order for you to have it, you need to have infrastructure that enables you to collect all those waste and repurpose that waste and use it. In our plant in Belgium, our base case is 90% of it, more than 90% of it is a non-fossil fuel. And the remaining 10% we are hoping to have it in bio-natural gas. Of course, the movement of all this will have to go through the ports and will have to go through the pipelines. And our fate in decarbonization, our pace of decarbonization to more or less extent depends on the infrastructure and the ports.
Yes, thank you so much. You point to some real implications of these hard to abate sectors where new technologies can come in. The need for certain infrastructural blocks to follow the rollout of other value chain developments. So it brings us very nicely to the next question that I'd love to hear your views on, which is the value chains that we're trying to build, whether it's on CCUS or green hydrogen, requires infrastructure in and of itself. Given the challenge that we face, right, we're a bit under time constraints if we look at net zero goals, but also just the reality of bringing industrial development into the 21st century, building out the big web of what's necessary for the future. What do we need to be doing first to build these out? How do you, given the challenge, how should we be spending our time going forward? We have to build out these value chains. Would maybe if I could ask, yeah, sure, please go ahead.
Coming back to my European footprint, right? I have around 30 plants. And I know that all 30 plants have the policy support in terms of ETS, in terms of innovation fund. So it's not the what is limiting at this moment where I install my CCUS plant and make it net zero is the infrastructure. Where is the infrastructure available? Where can the infrastructure be available? And whether or not the government is willing to support in the infrastructure development. And I think, unfortunately, in the energy transition is the entire value chain doesn't exist. So it has to be developed while you're developing the project. It has to be in a transparent and open manner with the value chain partners. That means that you absolutely have to open your books and then demonstrate what works and what doesn't work. And it has to be handled in a binary way where you have to say that while everyone makes money or no one makes money. If you don't have that attitude going in, infrastructure will not be developed. But I think what I've also seen the best practices is also the government playing a role in developing that infrastructure. That is the first infrastructure we have seen.
A clear signal from
yeah, and what we have seen it in UK, the clusters. The government is stepping in, and the government is providing some financial guarantees and promoting the infrastructure development. That way, the emitters can have confidence. Think about it. My plants, most of them are 500,000 to 600,000 tons to 1 million maximum. At that volume, there's no economy of scale for me to be investing in a 200-kilometer pipeline and then the terminal and then shipping. That's not what a private company, a cement company can do, and we have to rely on partners and government.
Yeah, of course. Maybe would you, Dan,
yes.
please do come in.
Maybe to add something and to come in, I think that we have to be aware that the industries have to work together also. It's about creating volume. You're not a competitor in the reduction of CO2. And if then you can create volume, like as a port, of course, we are very happy that we could look to a shipping solution, but even better is create that much volume that we can go for a pipeline solution, which will be much cheaper than a shipping solution on the long term. So try to create the volume if we're looking to the CO2 reduction, because I think that then the private companies, the industrial companies are partners and not competitors to reduce the CO2. Second, if we're looking to what the government can do, in my opinion, it's not always about only a subsidy for an eternal period. It's being aware that at a certain moment you can have an investment in 27, but another company maybe in 30, 32. You know about what the market will be approximately 35, for example, in CO2. And then you need a government or a public body who can try to invest in a capacity a bit before the market is there totally. And that's the important thing. I don't think we can ask for the government subsidize everything, but make it possible. That's a very important one. We know that the market will be there 30, 35. We know that volume will be there in 30, 35. I think it's up to a government or another public body to make it possible now for the first believer and the first who has to invest. And that's the important thing for me if we're looking to financing. Don't try to look only to the public bodies to finance everything, but try to finance before the market is mature. That's the most important message to make it happen, I think.
Yeah, you make the point of a delicate balance between signal being given on the public sector side, on government, and then how private sector then engages with that and takes that further. It used to be private sector led, but public sector enabled, right? In that sense. Tom, please do come in.
Yeah, I think it's if I combine the two different roads, the hydrogen road of renewable road and the CO2 road, they're completely different. I do think that if we look at the cases first for hydrogen, if you look at the cases, indeed, it's always that chicken and egg discussion and the offtake market, which is not clear yet, which is really slowing down decisions on terminals and cracking installations, and which is slowing down decisions on projects abroad to be to FID. This is different on the CO2. People like Holcim, I was in the opening of your plant. People like Holcim, they are taking decisions. The volumes are known. So we do know that we will have only in Belgium, we summed up all the big emitters and we come to a figure already for Belgium of 18 million ton. Only for Belgium. Without counting on figures of North Rhine-Westphalen. So these are massive, massive figures. And there I do think, and I do also see that we are together in Pipelink, which is one of the owners of a joint venture of creating a backbone in Belgium to invest a complete backbone from the plant of Holcim, from Germany, to centralize those volumes in Antwerp, but also to create that connection of a sea pipeline to Norway. Those decisions we will take upfront as a public-private company, because it will come. It's clear it will come. So it's for us, it's only timing. It's not if we will do. It's just will we get permitting? Will we get the approval of the CNO? That we will get the one and only will be the one and only party to do this. So that's very clear. On hydrogen, there are a lot of questions. It's much more individual business cases.
Yeah. So the creation of that pipeline is actually done in conjunction. It is, or the signal is being given so that that can roll out. Philip, would you like to come in here?
Yeah, absolutely. On a couple of fronts. One is there's so many things that have been said that resonate with what was one can confidently call a success story of Trinidad and Tobago when we entered into the natural gas market. And it comes back to your point about hydrogen. Back then, natural gas was a recognized international commodity. So the government confidently leaned into it and said, we will invest in the infrastructure and we will, by selective invitation, invite ammonia producers, methanol producers to the infrastructure that we create, because we knew there was a market that was out there. And as a result, if you fast forward to today, the importance of, for example, green fuel for shipping, which is, as you know, we were privileged along with some others to be the signatory to the call to action a few days ago, essentially asking for the acceleration of green fuels in the shipping world. What that does is it helps create a more predictable and known demand for green ammonia, green methanol. It starts to build that business model of confidence into private sector to invest into this new green hydrogen, green energy space. But to your point, I do think lightning has to hit twice, and governments have to create that enabling environment in many regards by establishing or redefining their current infrastructure to be able to accommodate this new energy economy.
Building on a point that Dan mentioned, and just coming off of the back of your comments, Philip, financing. It begs the question here. If this is a delicate balance, or a delicate dance, if you will, between public sector and private sector, the rollout of not nascent, but let's say new technologies that still have infrastructure itself that enables it to be built out. What do the conversations on financing then look like or sound like from your perspective? You must be around these tables all the time, and how do you convey the signal that we're going ahead as you just mentioned? What does that look like?
Again, I think financing, it's the top of the financing part. We should really sub-segment the discussion. On CO2, it's really a public investment which has to be taken up front. And we don't look at the government, we look at ourselves. And we will do that investment up front. Is it on the terminal or on the backbone or on a compression installation in Zeebrugge to go to Norway? We will take all those decisions. The only thing there we ask from the government, which is not costing cash today, is de-risk our investment. If there is a slowdown, if it goes wrong, if the volumes are going slower in the market, make sure that there is somewhere a backup mechanism that we can keep our cash
A form of
balance
guarantees.
right. A guarantee. Yeah, that's the only thing we ask there. A back-to-back system which guarantees us. That's for CO2. On the part of hydrogen, there we have to split again the discussion into two parts. You have today hydrogen. You have in Europe the Red 3 document, which is a transportation angle and which has a industry angle. For transportation, again, there, in fact, if you follow, it's a bit technical, the refinery route, where hydrogen is used to process fossil fuel, the premium price we all will have to pay on the pump will be very, very limited, and the volumes are high. So this is an accelerator to get your infrastructure built. So there we should not subsidize this. Yeah? On the other hand, you have the industry part, where you have to really transform. Is it big chemical plants, steel plants? They cannot make the switch. There we should really isolate, we should really give public funding for a kickstart period of at least 10 years.
Intervene where it's most needed, really, to make that segment. Dan, please.
Maybe something to add. I totally agree with Tom, but one of the questions is also, what do we finance? If at a certain moment, of course, the best thing is to go for green hydrogen everywhere. That's the best. But if an intermediate period, if that's not affordable, even financially, and you can have your blue hydrogen with CO2 reduction, then on climate you have also almost what you want to have. And at a certain moment, it's about combining what is affordable and what is financeable. And sometimes when I go back 10 years, everyone was dreaming about green and everything green, 100% green. First of all, the availability is not there, and it's not possible to finance it for the moment in certain sectors, although public would finance it in a way that you need 10, public will do 8, and then you have the financing of 2 of the private sector. That's not affordable, neither for public. So also going in an intermediate for some other solutions with the same result on CO2 reduction is more part of, for me, of the financial problem than for the technical problem. And that's something I want to bring in the debate. Try to finance what's possible also, to finance also for public bodies today.
Yeah, very nicely complemented. Maybe, Philip, would you still like to come in before we take the final round of questions?
Yeah, very quickly, I think in the Caribbean's case, it's a bit of a unique, a rare challenge that we face, particularly in the green hydrogen, green energy space. With the exception of Trinidad and Tobago, which already has a large chemical industry. All of the other Caribbean islands, up until the advent of green hydrogen as a export commodity, have struggled with economies of scale. They've never been able to justify the investment in a geothermal plant in Dominica or St. Kitts, or the solar and wind excess capacity in Barbados. And as a result, the financing institutions have never been able to make the business case. They say, look, we want to help, but this isn't to the kind of scale that we're used to. And part of what we're in service of is creating that regional energy integration vision, which will allow the excess supply of renewable energy potential in many of the Caribbean islands to link in with the immediate demand for renewable energy in Trinidad, because guess what? The investors love that nice big picture. It's something juicy for them to invest in, and it also, by its very nature of its size, helps de-risk. And I dare say it ticks the box very directly in terms of being in direct action with some of those countries who are most vulnerable, and helping them to be their own saviors by entering the green hydrogen, green ammonia, green methanol industries.
Well, thank you for that. And maybe as a final comment from the four of you, if I may, we are in times where there is a lot of discussion, not just about the green transition anymore, but also about industrialization, about how we go about that at large, whether it is in the US, Inflation Reduction Act, whether it is in Europe now, a lot of emphasis on competitiveness, on bringing in a sort of relaunch or a new momentum based on these technologies. How do you look at that? Is there an opportunity in disguise here? Is it not even in disguise at all? Is it political, or can we keep it quite private sector-led business only. If you get these questions, how would you respond to that? Maybe Philippe first, and then we'll just take the final round.
No, that's a big one. I think the best way to be able to answer that is, again, citing the experience of Trinidad, there was a model of aggregation, right? The National Gas Company came into existence to create that single nucleus of a large enough entity that could take the gas from the upstream producers of BP and Shell, transmit it through a gas pipeline that they owned to the downstream producers in ammonia, methanol, and LNG. By being that elegant middleman, it had created that critical mass to allow the industrialization to occur at a big scale. And by extension, the government at the time also invested in the first iron and steel project. They invested in the first ammonia fertilizer project. They created that kind of anchor proof of concept, almost demonstration for other investors to come to Trinidad and Tobago to build the plethora of ammonia and methanol facilities that we have right now. So that would be my 2 cents.
Fantastic. Maybe Dan, would you like to come in?
Yeah, maybe something which was not part of the debate till now. There is a political part still to be tackled also, and that's in regulation. I will give you one example. If you have a regulation that, for example, to reduce your CO2 and to bring it or to export it, that you need a purification of about 100%, then the price is so high that it's not affordable anymore. If the regulation allows that you are at 98 or 99, then the price is going down spectacularly. And that's also politics. It's about accepting that the 100% is the best solution, but it's not affordable financially. And sometimes you have to go for not very low, but a little bit less, and then it becomes another business case. And I think there also in regulation, allow blue hydrogen at a certain aspect, allow that purification can't be 100% if you try to combine CO2 from cement, for example, together with steel, together with chemicals. You have so many different qualities, and then even then the pipeline is the perfect one. But if you have so many rules for all those individual companies, then it can't be a pipeline, for example. And also that's a political aspect which has to be tackled in regulation.
Thank you for that. Pavan, and then Tom for the final.
Yeah, for me, to increase the competitiveness of cement sector in Europe, I think the funding is important, but I think this is not public money, by the way. This is the ETS allowances that the cement sector pays, and starting 27, we would pay significant amount of money. All we're asking is direct that money that we are paying back to industrialization, decarbonization, our own assets, so that we move at pace. That is absolutely key. It's not public funding, it's not tax money, it's not free money. It's the money which we pay, let direct that to us. And the second and the most important one, at least the CCUS, is we consume significant amount of electricity. For example, CCUS plant would almost double the electricity consumption. All we're asking is a well-functioning, integrated, interconnected, decarbonated power at an affordable scale and affordable price. And I think that is within the reach, but I think that would further increase the competitiveness of cement sector by making decarbonization and CCUS net zero a much more stronger business case than what it is today.
Signal on power. Tom, the final words are yours.
Yes, I think von der Leyen is at this moment working to make the transformation from a Green Deal to an industrial clean deal. Yeah. And that is really what is needed. That is really the translation of low carbon in the specifications, and to make it affordable, possible for industry to take the first steps in decarbonization, not the perfect one, but the first steps, and to keep the industry competitive in Europe. And that's really what needs to happen. Second to that, indeed, ETS money, where it comes from, use it to bring it to the next step. Yeah. The third one, don't throw it all on one pie, just split it up. Use the money, put the money only on the specific parts of the industry which need it, and look where we as a consumer can afford it. Make that split. And then the fourth one, local governments need to hurry up in the translation of all those legislations to get transparency for industrial players.
Thank you very much for setting out these points, showing that this is a very a live debate, a planning that is unfolding as we speak, and that you're all clearly a very active part of. So I thank you very much for joining me on this panel. Please do join me in a round of applause for our panelists. And so one panel has walked us through a few of the challenges ahead and where they see the next years, the medium term playing out. I'd now like to follow up on this infrastructure and decarbonization debate with a second panel that I'd invite to join me here on stage. Winston Beck, Head of Government Affairs at Heidelberg Materials. Didier Viot, CEO of Alia Group International. Arno Buchs, the Senior Vice President of Corporate Commercial at the Fluxus Group. And Matt Toombs, thank you, Director for International Climate Finance and Strategy of the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero of the United Kingdom. Welcome. Now, I would like to start in a similar fashion as we did in the previous panel. We're here to zoom in a bit more on international collaboration, maybe some of the lessons learned and success cases that have come out of that or are coming out of that. Again, it's very much an alive topic. But before we do so, I'd love to hear from each of you again how you come in, the role that you play within the decarbonization of infrastructure and value chains at large. Maybe if I could start with you, Tom. Yeah. I believe it is.
Hold on. There, I've turned it on.
And I think it's very fitting that you speak first in light of the NDC that came out earlier this week, I think a couple of days ago, that set a pace for ambition. Thank you for that.
Thank you for asking me to be part of this panel, and it's good to be able to join as a government representative. There's been such strong private sector examples that we've been hearing so far. I'm really fascinated by the discussion we've been having. So from the UK perspective, we have a new government that is come into place this summer with a very strong mission on tackling climate change as one of its top priorities. It has set out one of its 5 missions is to become a clean energy superpower, and it's translated that as a 2030 fully decarbonised power system, as well as a wider commitment on climate change. So coming to this COP, the focus has been on 3 areas really. One of them is on finance. This is a finance COP, as you said, but it's looking at the kind of full range of financial levers that are available to mobilise all sources of finance. The second is then on ambition, on mitigation ambition. As you said, the UK set out its 2035 NDC. We've got at least 81% on 1990 levels, which is following the advice that we had from our independent climate change committee. And the third area then is working with countries on resilience and adaptation and those critical issues. And so my role in this is in working in the energy security net zero space, and we're looking at the translation. So our department covers both the international aspects in terms of NDCs and mitigation action, but then the translation of that also into domestic plans. And you may have seen some interesting work by our NISO, our service operator, starting to sketch out some of the steps that are needed to get to an 81% NDC, and in particular a 2030 fully decarbonised power system. So that's a short summary from me.
Thank you very much. I think the examples that you said in terms of, for example, the NDCs, it's a very fitting example here at COP29, where that gives an indication of governments taking the lead and putting out important signals, not just for political ambition, but also for investment, for the private sector that is also gathering here at COP. Arno, if I may turn to you.
The question was how we came to decarbonization, right?
Your particular input in the whole decarbonization story as Fluxus Group?
Right. So Fluxus Group is an unbundled pipeline, mainly pipeline infrastructure operator. So we operate pipelines in our home country, Belgium, but also 11 other countries in Europe and abroad, in Latin America and Middle East. We also operate LNG terminals and underground gas storages. So this is what we do, have done for decades. And our entry into or our contribution to the decarbonization solution is double. First of all, micro fails. It's back.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. We could start that again. Just your sentence, not.
Right. So it's double. It's first of all decarbonizing our own activities, obviously, as many other industrial companies do, and second, provide the infrastructure. Mostly the pipeline infrastructure for both providing hydrogen of whatever color, actually, to companies that can afford it. And on the other side, also providing pipeline solutions for CO2 logistics. And that has been brilliantly developed by Tom and Dan in the first panel. So I can only build on that and also on the particular challenges that we as a pipeline operator have in this context. And that is, as was outlined, that yes, we have a good view on, let's say, the mid to long term demand when it comes to CO2. But you will not build a pipeline system modularly. You can extend it geographically, but the first pipeline that you will lay will be dimensioned on the ultimate demand. So that means that in the first phase of its life cycle, it's over-dimensioned. Okay, and then the question is, who pays that? If you would put those costs on the first users, which is the hard-to-abate sectors, it will not fly. It will not happen. It's way too expensive. Now there are financial.
Oh, very sorry.
There another mic. Maybe I can use this one.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, let's try this one. So.
You were saying on the hard to
That, exactly. So there are financial instruments that are well known out of, let's say, the regulatory system to make future customers bear those costs. And then the only things that are needed, as was said, but it bears repeating, is a pre-financing from the governmental side combined with a guarantee mechanism for the case that this development fails. So we are not speaking about subsidies. We are not speaking about rerouting public money to this. We are speaking about overcoming the first phase through mechanisms that allow future users to contribute to the costs of today. So this is what is needed for the CO2. And indeed, hydrogen is a totally different story. It's just too expensive. I mean, there are no customers, right? This week, we read that Uniper, which is owned by a government that is very strongly pushing the hydrogen agenda, so you will not find any industrial player that is more inclined to develop this value chain, basically stopped its commercial activities. So green hydrogen today has a cost challenge, and as soon as the cost decreases will kick in, we hope that we can overcome this, which is absolutely necessary, of course, right? But we have just to recognize the fact that today the costs of electrolyzers are increasing. Okay, so that is just a challenge. But we have enough challenges to address. We talked about the CO2 one just before this, and this is already, with that we have our hands full. But we develop both hydrogen and CO2 for the time that the business case starts flying.
It would be interesting to understand or to dig a bit deeper, perhaps in the next round, on some of the bottlenecks that might be responsible for that cost challenge, just to go a bit further into that. But it's very interesting that you point to this. Didier, if I can turn to you from the Alia Group. Alia Grid International, sorry.
Yeah, Alia Group. We are one group. First maybe to present who we are quickly. So Alia Group is the owner and operator of a transmission system operator in Belgium, but also northeast Germany, actually. So we actually have to transmit the electron at the high level, let's say, and feed the industry that need those electrons. So our mission is clear. So we need to transmit those green electrons as much as possible, but they have to be extremely reliable as well. So that's the other mission we have. It's not only producing and delivering electrons, it has to be good enough so it can feed an industry. And that's part of the challenge we're facing. It's not like rushing to develop an infrastructure. It has to be done in a correct way, let's say. So for years and years, Alia has been pushing for the development of those infrastructure. Historically, Belgium is a little bit in the middle of Europe, so we've been in the middle of the play, basically, seeing electrons move from Est to West, North to East, so we've been in the middle of that market, and we played a big role, let's say, to develop that electricity market in Europe. So from the beginning, let's say, we were part of that game. The problem we have in Belgium is basically we need to be importing green electricity. We need to import that energy. So what we try to do is to develop energy where we can still do it, which is basically at sea. So we are developing the maximum power we can develop at sea, renewable energy. And that's still, let's say, a national issue. So it's connecting from mainland to the offshore parks that are in our seas. That's still, let's say, a national problem to solve. But that's not enough. After that, you need to go and capture power further down the line and go really deep sea or further down to other countries. And there you need to start talking to other countries. And that's what we started to do also for quite a long time ago. So we have interconnectors, typically the Nemo link connecting Belgium and the UK, which is one of the success stories that we developed in the past. Very efficient interconnector, helping to connect those electricity markets. We do the same in Germany. We are the first one in the world actually to have developed what we call an hybrid interconnector, so to exchange power between Germany, Denmark, and capture wind along the way. So all those very important projects for us are key, so we can really import the renewable power we need in Belgium to feed the industry. But coming back on the reliability of it, that's a very important challenge. We don't want to have a system which is, provoking blackouts every 2 weeks, because I'm not sure the industry will be happy with that, even if it's green electrons. So we are very careful in developing that in a correct way. Of course, it comes with a cost, and making sure that all those developments are, let's say, affordable at the same time as reliable is one of our key missions. Just to give you an idea, in the 5 years to come, our capex plan to develop those infrastructures is roughly 30 billion euro only for Belgium and Germany, which shows the scale of how much investment we need to put there to make sure those electrons are flowing. I know in the last COPs we were talking a lot about grids. There was even a motto saying there's no transition without transmission, right? This one I think everybody understood, and everybody is talking about that. I would even say there's no transition without smart transmission, because we need also to have a smart transmission which is affordable, reliable, but also flexible, and I think we'll come back to that later.
No, it's let's say you point towards the fact that we've woken up to the grid challenge. It used to not be on the agenda at all, just a few COPs or maybe energy conferences ago. So in that sense, at least we're starting to look at things from a systemic point of view. Now, reliability, affordability, of course, you point towards this. And I think the interconnectors in particular, we'll come back to this later, how international collaboration between all of you on the panel really works best and gets us to where we need to go. Winston, love to hear from you how you approach this challenge.
Yes, so Winston Beck from Heidelberg Materials. We are another big construction material producer. In Europe, actually, we are present in 22 markets with around 35 ETS installations, so clinker installations, which are energy intensive and emission intensive. And we actually have the most ambitious CO2 reduction target in our industry for 2030, so we almost want to halve our CO2 footprint globally by then. And that is 5 years from now. So what we're really advocating is that we need to pick up speed. I think some of the decarbonization levers we are having were already mentioned in the previous panel. It is very clear that we must focus on emission avoidance in the first place. So we are doing everything from defossilization with alternative fuels, renewable electricity, process optimization, as well as introducing alternative raw materials, because 70% of our emissions are actually coming from the process. But it is also very clear that for around 30% of our process emissions, we need CCUS. And CCUS is actually the only technology to date which will get us to net zero. So that is absolutely critical for hard-to-abate sectors like ours. And that is why we have actually started the journey talking about CCUS very early on, way before I joined the company. I think the first meetings happened already in 2004, and the first project was kicked off in 2014. By now we have published the intention to build 12 large-scale CCUS installations in Northern America as well as in Europe, and to capture and store 10 million tons of CO2 already by 2030. And I think we are optimistic because we can actually show considerable progress. We will have mechanical completion of the first CCS facility in the cement world in about 2 weeks' time in our plant in Norway, Brevik, where we will, as of early Q2 next year, capture and store 400,000 tons of CO2 in the North Sea, together with the Northern Lights project, which is a consortium from Shell, Total and Equinor. And we have already launched, because of that, also the first ever green cement net zero, which we will also bring to the market in summer next year. In addition to that, we have several plants in Europe, in the UK, with our Padeswood plant. We are part of the HyNet consortium, and I must really applaud indeed the commitment of the UK, really focusing on the clusters and helping them to advance in providing support in terms of the necessary regulations, but also the necessary funding in order to create the business case. And we also have 2 plants in Belgium, where one we have already announced the large CCS plants in Antoine, close to the French border, where we intend to capture 800,000 tons of CO2 and then also transport them to the port and into the North Sea. But it is absolutely critical now that we really focus on the main levers, how to make that happen. I think a lot of that was discussed already. We do need to work on the business case. It was mentioned that these are very high capex costs for industries like us, and we need to pre-finance them before actually the products come to the market and we can make a business out of it. So we need to de-risk these projects, and for that we need to have funding. I agree that the ETS revenues provide a very good source. We have actually, in our industry, we have calculated that between 2024 and 2035, we will pay around 80 to 100 billion euros into the ETS. If only half of that would be kind of given to large point sources to decarbonize, we could make a huge step in decarbonizing Europe and also in decarbonizing our industry. And there are actually very cost-efficient models how to do that, like carbon contracts for difference, for example, which ensure that we are not getting too fat, we are not getting too slim, so we really have some planning certainties for these types of projects. Another thing which is important for the business case, which was not mentioned so far, is actually demand creation. So we really need customers who want to buy net zero cement. And we are pioneering that now with our Evo Zero coming from our Norway plant. But that is still very much niche. So we really need to work on making sure that there are regulations in place looking at embodied carbon in buildings, but also revising necessary procurement rules. And then, of course, we really need to work on the infrastructure. And here, pipelines are absolutely key because they are the most cost-efficient solution. I mentioned our 2 plants in Belgium. Together with our other plants in northern France and southern Germany, including North Rhine-Westphalia, we ourselves could deliver around 5 million tons of CO2 per annum to the pipeline infrastructure in Belgium. So indeed, we are working closely with our partners there in order to advance these projects.
You mentioned demand creation is necessary, infrastructure, de-risking in particular on the business case going forward, and perhaps at aggregate as well. It makes me want to go to you, Matt. On climate finance is really what we're here to discuss. International collaboration as well. I mean, it's COP29 after all. If not together, then how, right? How do you respond to a request, let's say, a call for de-risking these types of technologies? How can that be part of climate financing, and what should be, what are you hearing, and even in the discussions on the NCQG, on what the quantum should be for climate finance at large? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is being discussed a lot in the rooms around here. So you're coming at it in various different routes. I think the idea around sort of demand aggregation is incredibly important. So that operates globally. So being able to pull together different forms of demand, whether I've been in discussions on public procurement and the need to be able to pull together, the vast financial resources that governments across the world are deploying in terms of their procurement of steel or cement or other core materials, and being able to put very clear signals and requirements through public procurement of the carbon content that's needed, and use that as a way of aggregating signals. There are examples in the private sector, the First Mover Coalition and others that are pulling together some of that sort of very clear demand signal. And there are kind of specific schemes that we're working with. So we are working with Brazil on a industrial decarbonization hub and a hydrogen hub, which is looking at pulling together all the different forms of international financial assistance that can support the development of their sectors, so that supports the sort of flow of different forms of finance, developing country-led strategies and country-led agendas based around development of those two elements. And then there are an increasing sort of recognition within parts of the public finance system. For example, the climate investment funds, the CIFs, have just launched a new window on industrial decarbonisation. So sort of recognition that we need to have more of this sort of multilateral fund flowing in an enabling way to support others coming through. So it is definitely playing in a sort of bigger way in discussions here.
Well, and it invites to think about international collaboration as well, not in the least because of the examples that were even cited here by Arno, by Didier, by Winston, in terms of what you're already doing. But, and I'm sure that Minister van der Straten, no one is best placed to highlight the role here on how that can really shift the needle in terms of getting initiatives, not just in the pipeline, but actually created and connecting in Europe, but let's say also beyond countries specifically. What is the real dividend from international collaboration? How do you look at that as you all operate clearly with partners in other countries, meaning having to deal with other governments, other policy and regulations that are still in itself in the making? Many countries might still be making up their mind on how to go about this, using COP as a reference point, for example. How do you navigate this space? Is it something that is easy to do? And how do you go forward with that? Is that something that really needs to be front and center as we try to make everything, get demand aggregated, get the technologies on track? Maybe I could start with you, Arno.
I see international cooperation working necessarily on 3 levels, not by any order of importance, just as they come to my mind. One is in the field of the commodity, okay, especially for mineral energy carriers. Having and I refer to what Philip said from Trinidad and Tobago earlier on. He started a sentence saying, well, because this is a global commodity, we had the possibility to invest into this and to actually scale it up. So having a global commodity, a tradable global commodity is of the essence, be it for hydrogen of whatever quality label you stick to it, low carbon, green, any color, but that it's tradable, so recognized and equal certification of that, be it for CO2, London Protocol, but also recognition of the ETS system in the respective countries. So all of this enabling international trade clearly is a governmental job. It can be supported by industry bodies, but at the essence, it's a governmental job. So that's one, on the commodity. Second, that's closer to us, infrastructure. In infrastructure, everything is about volume to bring the costs down. And when we look at CO2, it was mentioned before, we are looking at the Belgian volumes, but actually we are looking beyond that. the volumes from North Rhine-Westphalia. And their infrastructure operators work together to develop their relative projects in sync so that we can offer an end-to-end solution to these people that are looking for exactly that. So in that context, that can refer to a position being taken by our German colleagues from Open Grid Europe, not later than this week, end of last week, sorry, that the route for CO2 from North Rhine-Westphalia through Belgium to the ports and from there to Norway has now their first priority as an export route. So this is very important for the Belgian players. So this international cooperation. And then the third one is helping through international cooperation de-risking projects of the production of essentially green hydrogen and their derivatives in developing countries that have clearly a super high potential, that are fundamentally very competitive due to the availability of the sources, but that have different issues when it comes to financeability of these projects. And here, international cooperation can help de-risk these projects through, for instance, joint governmental guarantees or something like that. So those are the three fields that I see.
So turning it into a global tradable commodity, focusing on the infrastructure and de-risking the green hydrogen where it needs to be de-risked, of course. Didier, if I could ask you for your view on international collaboration.
Yeah, on collaboration, very, very critical question in our case, at least for the energy transmission, sorry. As I said before, so in our case, we need to connect further. We need to connect with other countries. So it's impossible to develop those projects without international collaboration. And another message from the COP was also the grid is a bit lacking. So we need more grids because we have energy to be connected, but the grid is coming too slow. So I think we have no time to lose by starting the collaboration. So we need to collaborate everywhere possible to connect any kind of green electrons we can connect to the system. So in our case, of course, there is a super good political support from the minister to make sure that we can engage those G2G communication and negotiation, even beyond Brexit, for instance, with the UK. Putting together, let's say, all the countries that have to collaborate in a platform like the North Sea platform, where people can start engaging with the strong support of the government. So this is key to not wait that everybody is ready to push the button, but really start working together. That's on the political level. On our side, we have also to agree with the neighboring countries how to do that. There is one specific aspect which is critical, is who is benefiting from that. We need to import energy, export it. So at the end of the day, we need to agree on who is paying what is the cost-benefit analysis. It can take a lot of time. I remember for the Nemo link, which was the first link to the UK, the regulatory process took much more time than just the building phase. It was roughly 7 years to agree on how it would operate. So you see, there's no time to lose to start engaging at all levels. Mentioning politically, we as utilities, the regulatory framework, the regulators have to talk to each other for sure. And then more and more we see a need of financing, because those projects are so big that us alone cannot finance them. So we need also support from EIB, for instance. And we have good news that we received for the Energy Island in Belgium, that EIB is supporting with a green loan, which is helping a lot, let's say, to push further the development of such projects. We got also good news from Ofgem in the UK that they are okay also to proceed with the Nautilus, which is the second link to the UK. You see, you need to push continuously to those, let's say, collaboration to make it happen. We don't have to wait that everybody is okay to proceed. Yeah.
So figuring out who pays for which part and the financing, raising the financing for that, for those parts, as well as taking into account the lead times that are often a reality check in terms of what is possible, what is not.
And we are already too late, so.
Extra urgency. Never a shortage of urgency at COP, that's for sure. Winston, if I could ask for your view.
Yes. So, I mean, traditionally, cement is a very local business, but now with the CCS developments, we are really creating completely new value chains, which are cross-industry and cross-country. So we are learning a lot, but collaboration is absolutely key. And I think we see some good examples. I mean, for example, at the European level, they came forward with the industrial carbon management strategy, setting an ambitious target of 50 million tons injection capacity by 2030. And that's important to to have an aspirational target also for those regions, for example, which have not yet the same ambition as those countries which are around the North Sea. I mentioned that we have 35 ETS installations. A lot of them are quite remote or inland located, and we also need to find solution for those. Of course, we are also discussing on the demand side. There is the first mover coalition. It very much started as a US-led initiative, but by now I think 7 or 8 countries are actually supporting it, and it has a concrete a chapter on cement and concrete to procure 10% of net zero by 2030. And also on the financing, I think the news earlier this week that there was an agreement found on Article 6.4, which would allow us, for example, to decarbonize plants in the global south and then to sell the reduction credits to a country in the north, which could then finance the project over a course of 10-15 years, is good news. And now we need to see that these standards and methodologies are actually being implemented in detail. And I think also on the bilateral side, we see some developments, especially, of course, the bilateral transport agreements with Norway and Sweden, with Denmark, Belgium, Netherlands and France are absolutely necessary to kick these pipeline developments. And there we hope also, I have to say, with the UK, that the UK and the EU come to an agreement, because of course we need to create also competition in the storage field. And I said we were working a lot with Northern Lights, but there's a lot more storage in the North Sea, a lot in UK territory. So I think we really need to solve the legal hurdles here and make sure that continental emitters can also use the CO2 storage in the UK.
Yeah, you mentioned Article 6 indeed. What happens to CBAM, for example, going forward, etc. These are all elements that will continue to feed into international collaboration at large, I would definitely say. As a way to wrap up, very shortly, to hear your final thoughts on sequencing. I want to say sequencing because from what I hear, there are a lot of moving pieces in this puzzle. Each complex, of course. Perhaps there's ways to figure out from how we've done this in the past that might give us a lesson on how we should do things the same or differently in the future. But the sequencing really, by that I mean, you know, policy regulation, financing, making sure that there is the right climate financing, that there is the right demand. It seems like a lot of things happening at the same time. If you were to give us your final thought on what are the 2-3 things that need to happen next in the midterm, so that the vision can play out as we've been laying it and laying it out here at COP, what would that be?
Yeah, so I mean, the message is obviously one of urgency. It's one globally. It's also, in the UK with 2030 clean power. You know, we need to move fast on a range of different fronts. So, that does cut across, each of the elements of policy regulation, finance. We are, as well as the UK focus on getting to clean power, which is accelerating renewables, accelerating transmission, grids, demand flexibility, all different elements. We're working internationally with something called the Global Clean Power Alliance, which is very much trying to work with other high ambition countries between global north and global south in seeing how we can massively accelerate the scale of the transmission of the transformation, and finance is at the core of that. So we think policy environments, regulatory environments are critical, but we also need to work really hard internationally to make sure that the finance flows in the right way. Thanks.
Arno, would you echo that or add to the list?
I'd like to highlight 3 points. One is I fully echo what Tom said earlier about choosing your targets and doing what is feasible, as opposed to doing what fits like the perfect catalog. I mean, we are all learning by doing the transition, so we should also, and it happens of course, recognize things that work maybe not as envisaged, but other things work better, so let's focus on those. Second is creating demand. Indeed, when we look, for instance, let's say green steel, right? Steelmakers say, this costs double of what grey steel costs. This is unsellable. We move, okay? And it's hard to make a case against that. But it's also exactly true that the final product, let's say a car, would cost maybe 5 to 10% more. And that is also a very strong argument. So how can we sort of shift the debate from the intermediate value steps in the value chain to the ultimate, to the final customer, and let him make his choice? I don't have an answer to that, but I think that is sort of part of the solution. And there was a third element that I just lost track of. I'm sorry. Maybe it come back or not. We'll see.
Come back.
Yeah, just I fully agree with what has been said. For me, prioritization, same. For instance, in our case, we have an issue with the supply chain to deliver all of that infrastructure. So everybody's trying to deliver everything at the same time. It creates a bottleneck, price goes up, it's not sustainable. So we need exactly to look at what is important to deliver first and focus on delivering that thing. Take the example of the North Sea, for instance. There are many projects. It would be good to look at which one is the most value creator, basically, and focus on this one, deliver this one. So focusing and prioritizing, one thing. Second, financing. We're talking about billions and billions of euro, and we need to find smart ways to finance this so that it remains affordable for everyone. And there are ways to do that. So Alia has published a paper with Ørsted to propose ways to create, for instance, an investment bank that would focus on financing those projects. I think those innovative ideas need to be pushed further so that we unlock a little bit the development of the infrastructure. Yeah.
I
Came
think
back?
Arno, yes. It came
you
back
finished?
third. Perfect time.
Thanks, it came back indeed. Progressive solutions. So one of the, you said about can we learn from the past? What has made the success of renewable electricity? The fact that we could use existing infrastructure up to a certain point. Now we need to build more, but we could use the existing infrastructure because we accepted a drop-in solution. We accepted the fact that yes, we take advantage of a system that is basically transporting 100% fossil or nuclear produced energy carrier to add in an increasing amount of renewables. Okay, so we didn't face this obstacle from the very beginning. Oh, we need to build a new infrastructure, which is unpayable. No. We can do the same to a certain extent for gas. There are sources of renewable gas, a lot of them, biogas or even synthetic methane. And if we give them sort of a support in progressively decarbonizing that part of the fossil value chain, then we don't face immediately this big hurdle of new infrastructure. And frankly, I don't see why we don't do this. And it boils down all the way into, let's say, taxonomy, where electric infrastructure is recognized de facto as green, regardless of the percentage of green energy that is actually flowing through it, whereas pipelines are considered de facto as non-green, regardless of the percentage of green or renewable gases that are flowing through it. And frankly, I don't see the case for that at all, right? So drop-in solutions lower the hurdle big time for contribution. Now, is this the 100% solution? No, it's not. But we need all the solutions, also the ones that are not 100%.
Winston, the final word is yours.
Yes, I think our main wish would be really to close the gap between ambition and action. I mean, the Commission, focusing on Europe, the Commission will come forward with a 90% target for 2040. We have the ETS in place, which says that no new allowances will be given to industry after 2039. So what are the solutions to decarbonize industry by then? And there, I must say, the regulation and the policies in place are absolutely not sufficient. So our wish would be, of course, that the next Commission will use the Clean Industrial Deal to really look at what do we need to do now, what do we need to prioritize in terms of getting the infrastructure in place, both for CO2 as well as for electricity. We will double our power demand by double or even triple our power demand by then. And also in terms of, as we said, financing. I mean, the Innovation Fund is still very much focused on innovation and it's not suitable for deployment, but we are moving now to deployment. So I think these things which needs to be addressed in the next 5 years in order to really reach the targets which have been set.
Yeah, and a fitting time as the Commission is, well, its new term is just around the corner. Thank you for these points. I note urgency. I note the need to raise financing and de-risk in particular, create demand at large, choose and deliver, or focus rather on where what can be done in terms of progressive solutions as well, and closing that gap between ambition and action. So, thank you very much for your time. Please do join me in a round of applause for our panelists. And I would now like to yield the floor and the podium, if I may, to Minister Tine van der Straeten, Minister of Energy of Belgium, for closing remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, also esteemed colleagues. Thank you very much that I can take the stage again in our beautiful EIB Benelux pavilion, the place you need to be if you want to talk about collaboration, for example. Today, the matter on collaboration is a matter that is of profound importance to me as a person, as a minister, and specifically also as a Belgian minister. We see today this urgent need for a better and a stronger collaboration among countries and also stakeholders to achieve our ambitious energy targets. And energy targets are no longer a matter of the European Union alone, who has written down, stipulated targets in its different energy packages, directives and regulations. It's not only a matter of individual countries alone, but since last COP in Dubai, energy targets are now also a UNFCCC matter. In the UAE consensus, we decided on tripling up renewables by 2030, doubling energy efficiency, and also at the same time moving away from fossil fuels. So these are now clearly international targets that has to be implemented through our different regions, in our different countries, by working together. And yes, it is very ambitious, but it was also Nelson Mandela who said it seems always impossible until it's done. And I'm an optimistic, so I see an opportunity in every challenge that we face. And if we heard the panel just here, we have seen several entrepreneurs, several businesses who also see many opportunities in this huge energy transition. And these goals are not just about energy, are not just about climate change. It's also about comfort, it's about health, it's about quality of life, it's about the competitiveness of our industries. And so it's very clear that we cannot do it on our own. No single country can do it on their own, but no single stakeholder can achieve these targets in isolation. So if we want to succeed, we have to collaborate among countries, with stakeholders, and with citizens. And so we know all the challenges ahead. We have been discussing this for the past few days, and specifically today at Energy Day. We need to invest in infrastructure. We need to find the right financing scheme. We need to establish enabling, effective, stable regulatory frameworks, and so on. But to address those needs, we need to collaborate more. And why did I say just a few minutes ago that this is a matter of strong importance to me as a person, but specifically also as a Belgian minister? Belgium is a country with a lot of challenges and so a lot of opportunities. Belgium is a country that is very strategically positioned inside the European Union. And we are faced with an energy policy that every energy minister before me has seen the same challenges. We cannot produce all the energy we need on our own because simply we don't have that many resources. And yes, we have sun and yes, we have wind, but we have a very small coastline also, only 67 kilometers. So what did we do? We worked together with our neighboring countries. We are one of the best interconnected countries. We are interconnected with all of our neighboring countries, and we are also interconnected overseas. We have not the possibility to store large amounts of gas underground. So what did we do? We built an LNG terminal, we built extensive pipelines, we connected to our neighboring countries, and our interconnection is our storage. Our interconnection is our security of supply. Of course, today we are in another era. We are a completely different era. We are now in the era of electrification. We are now in the era tripling renewable energy and moving away from fossil fuels. So that means that everything that we have been doing, we need to do the same, but in a different way. Because we were used to build generation where demand was. But wind and sun are not everywhere at the same time in the same quantities. So this completely changes how we build out our grids. So this is by nature not something that we can do on our own anymore. And this is not a way that we can just simply bilaterally connect to each other. So we have to revise, and we also have to become better in these collaboration projects. So how did we do it, or how are we moving forward in this different era? Let me first begin with electrification and with grids. Belgium was only a few months ago the president of the Council of the European Union. And so this council presidency came after Repower EU legislation. This was European legislation that was meant to repower EU in another way, weaning off fossil fuels and basing our electricity supply on solar, on wind, on these huge quantities. And we also came after the UAE consensus on the tripling up and the doubling down. Okay, these are targets, but targets need to switch from targets and ambitions to specific electricity to be supplied. So that's why we need the grid. The grid as an enabling factor. And as I said, we can not do this on our own. So that's why we brought the grids front and center to our European presidency to the Council of the EU. So as to find a common understanding between the 27 EU member states to think together at a regional and at a European level how to develop our grids, so that we can approach this first from a regional approach to regional cooperation mechanisms and bring this to a European agenda. This was the first time that we started talking about sharing costs, but also sharing benefits. Because ultimately, when we are talking about connecting renewable energy to the grid, it's about sharing welfare. It's about huge kilometers of cable, but it's about sharing welfare and sharing benefits. Second example that I want to give is on offshore wind. Belgium, with its 67 kilometers of coastline, is the second country worldwide with regard to offshore wind capacity per capita. It made us it was because we pioneered 20 years ago, and it brought us where we are today. So it's good for us, but it's even better for the rest of us. And so that's why we, as Belgium, we are a strong partner in the North Sea Summit, for example, bringing together different countries, member countries and non-member countries to the EU together to decide together on how to tap into the vast resources that the sea basin and the North Sea can hold. But it made us also a proud member of GOA, the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. And we welcomed, only a few hours ago, still new members to the GOA community. When you are a first mover, you have a first mover advantage for sure, but in an era that we have to speed up massively what we are doing, we cannot leave everyone on their own, and to leave all the rest, invent the hot water afterwards. So we need to share expertise, we need to share good examples, and we need to listen to each other, what each other's challenges are. The Belgium example can maybe not be copied into several other countries. Some yes, others not. But just by having a conversation, just by talking about each other's challenges, we can maybe provide another line of thinking, or people can be inspired. So these global alliances, like the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, is of utmost importance to bring countries together. And so that's why we are not only speaking to Norway, for example, the UK, Denmark, all those examples that were already cited and that are connected to our Belgian energy island, but that we are also talking to, for example, Colombia or California, to share our expertise that they then can further implement in their policies. And the second example that I want to give is on hydrogen. And hydrogen, we have been establishing different MOUs with different countries around the world, with Oman, for example, and with Namibia, for example. And what is very specific about these partnerships And the same goes for offshore wind. These are rarely government-to-government understandings alone. We consistently bring in industrial stakeholders. We consistently bring in our industries in Belgium that are front and center and already present today in the energy transition. Alia, when it regards electricity, our dredging companies, Jan de Nul and DEME, when it regards offshore wind. With regard to hydrogen, it means Fluxus, of course, Port of Antwerp, but also our industries already today present in our ports. Of course, we need the energy for our own citizens, for the Belgian households, for the Belgian industries and the Belgian businesses. But it's not about us alone. It's not about us alone. For example, Namibia, a beautiful country on the African continent, where 600 million countries, 600 million citizens don't have access to electricity. So it's huge. And the beauty of a hydrogen project is that you cannot do hydrogen without electricity. So this hydrogen project on the ground in Namibia, which is built by CMB Tech, which is a marine vessel logistics company who need clean fuel to fuel their vessels. They also are going to install huge quantities of solar power also from wind. And so a country like Namibia also needs these investments for two reasons. They need the jobs to create job opportunities for the people in Namibia, but they also need massive investments to electrify townships, for example, to create a better life for Africans, for Namibians. And we are consistently looking in our partnership for these win-win partnerships. It is through these win-win partnerships that we ultimately can tackle and can address a solution, have a solution in place to tackle climate change. You can imagine that I can keep going on with examples and not just limit myself to Namibia, Oman, or offshore wind. But the very point that I want to make is that we all know that the road to a greener future is not a straight one. It's paved with challenges and, of course, steep learning curves. But by learning from each other, by collaborating, not only with countries, also with stakeholders and stakeholders among themselves, we can conquer together. By having in mind that we have one common goal that encompasses all the rest you want to do. And that common goal is, on the one side, tackle the climate crisis. So many people died just this year in floods, in wildfires, as a consequence of hurricanes, all related to extreme weather events. Climate change is not something that is distant or that is for countries far away. It's at our door front. And so renewable energy provides us with a solution to tackle climate crisis. And at the same time, it will provide us with a resilient and also a secure energy system. And that is our second common goal, to provide this geopolitical stability, to learn from lessons we have learned from the past. I want to end with something that was said by Lord Nicholas Stern in one of the ministerial panels that I have attended. And he said, we have been in difficult situations before. And we have also done it before. So we can do it again. And he even said, just do it. Just do it. And so we need to move forward with conviction, knowing that when we collaborate and when we combine our individual strengths, we can become a force for collective progress. Thank you.